Computer. Perfect. Okay. Hello, Travis.
Hey, Joe.
um, Thank you for joining me on this episode, if you could call it like that. Maybe we can chat a little bit about how to grow your podcast on social media.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of people know, but a lot of people who have been following us on Instagram have seen Travis reels. He done amazing reels on starting a podcast with Blubrry in our last campaign, and we're really happy to have you. And since you've been very popular to a lot of Blubrry audience now, people love you, sending us very positive feedbacks about how they find your advice very valuable after we refer them to your site and also introduce them to Social Boom. I decided that it would be nice to have you here to share a little bit about growing podcasts on social media. And so why don't you kind of just introduce a little bit about yourself first before we
Sure.
dive in?
So I'm Travis, and I am obsessed with helping the average creator basically reach an audience, build a community, and turn that into their own job, turn it into a full-time thing, because there's so many tools at our disposal in 2022 that allow us to reach a global audience. Like, just for instance, Blubrry, right? You can start telling stories and sharing value and get that message all around the globe just through one microphone, which is amazing. And then, of course, you can turn that into a community of people that support you, collaborate with you, maybe work for you one day. And you can fire your boss and you could do your own thing. And it's very exciting to me because, I always dreamed about it. And now I'm living it, which is a whole nother experience. But, if I can do it, I think anyone can do it, because I don't have, I do have a college degree, but it's not for anything that's related to this. And I wasn't a good student, and I'm not the smartest person or the most handsome person, but that makes me feel like there's hope for everybody who might be in a situation that they're not really enjoying right now, and that they could share their passion and share their knowledge with the entire world.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And that's why we think that you are gonna be a great voice, like because a lot of people feel like they have to have a talent for something, for public speaking, for having a niche on something in order to give the audience some content, because content creating could be intimidating to a lot of people, especially when a lot of time people are not on camera often or don't don't know where to start to begin with. And having an account that, like an Instagram account, for example, and growing that to something bigger, like a business, is something that a lot of people don't always imagine. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's possible, especially for
Oh,
podcaster.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, my entire career as a creator has really been an evolution. And when I started off, I was just doing podcast production in the background. No one knew who I was. No, I wasn't a part of any shows. I was just helping other people because I have an audio engineering degree, and so I knew how to do audio stuff. And it was just something I really enjoyed because I used to be a professional musician. And storytelling in songs and storytelling in podcasts is very similar. So I had a good idea of what would make for a good podcast. And then I was like, well, I want a podcast. So I started podcasting, which was the best place to start because I could hide behind the microphone. And I hid behind a microphone for many, many years. I didn't put myself out on social media. I didn't put my picture anywhere. And then, I created pod decks, which I wanted to get out into the world and allowed me to share some of my tips and tricks on podcasting that I'd learned. And so I started to put myself out there, right? In just pictures and carousel posts, not even video, because I was terrified of it. And then I started to push my boundaries, and I'm like, I'm going to try to do video, even though I'm uncomfortable and I'm not always comfortable with my appearance or how I sound. And then I started to do video. Now I'm obsessed with video. And I think if you look at anybody who's where you want to be, the first thing you need to do is go all the way back to their beginning. So if it's like a YouTuber, go to their YouTube page and go to the very first video and see where they were when they started, because that's really who you're competing with. Like, a lot of people compare themselves to someone in their current state. But there's an evolution of us all, and you have to try new things and see what resonates with you. And so, it's exciting because I have no idea what's next. I mean, I think videos are probably the big thing, but who knows? We could be in VR soon. We could be on, a satellite dish somewhere. Who knows, right? So you have to embrace that. And if content creation seems, intimidating to you, all we're doing when we create content is sharing cool stuff. It could be, hey, I love this bubbly water, right? LaCroix, it's the best. This is my favorite bubbly water, right? You're just sharing something that you love with other people. It could be a tip. It could be a story. It could be a lesson. It could be, keeping people from being harmed. Like there's so many things that each individual person has their own unique experiences that I think that they could easily share if they just look at it through that lens. I'm just sharing cool stuff with the world, right? Then content creation doesn't seem so intimidating.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah.
That makes it 100 times less intimidating already. And
yeah, that's all it is. We're just sharing cool stuff.
Wow. That kind of answers like I have a question for you. And it was basically why should podcasters leverage social media and is it hard to start? But you kind of answer a little bit of that already and make it less scary for people. But why for podcasters, from like a business perspective where because you want to attract new listeners.
Yeah.
And social media is Instagram, for example, because I know you grow on that platform and you focus on that platform a lot. So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I think that podcasters are at a big disadvantage from a discoverability situation, simply because people wake up in the morning and they check their phone and they check their email and then they check social media. They don't necessarily open up a podcast app first, right? So podcasters need to be on social media because it's where the eyeballs are. It's where the traffic is. It would be like having a billboard on a street that no one drives down, right? We want to be in front of people to have an opportunity to get more listeners. So high traffic area is social media, any platform. If it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, any of them are high traffic areas. So we need to make sure that we're at least giving ourselves a chance. And, secondarily, in my opinion, and I'm really big on community, and I know Blubrry is too, which is why I love you guys. There's a community aspect to each creator. And I would say that it's probably the biggest opportunity for everybody is to start a gang or build a club or do something where you're going to attract the people that are going to be your biggest supporters, future collaborators, future employees. And you don't need millions of people in order to be a full-time creator. You just need like 1,000 true fans that would potentially like support you $100 a year and you're making $100,000, right? So podcasting is an amazing medium. And, we were just at Podcast Movement and I see, there's always people that are trying to improve the medium and podcasting doesn't need to be improved. It's been the same way for 20 years because it's great the way it is. It's audio, it's stories, it's RSS feeds. And in my opinion, doesn't really need to be improved. So, as we're out there, I notice how much the community is really such a big part of podcasting, right? And how much of a community we need to build around ourselves. And I think that that's where social media can tie into your podcast because, again, it's a one-way street. I talk through this mic, it goes to your ears. You can't talk back to me, right? Where can you do that? Well, you can do that on social media. So now we have this two-way conversation and we're building community. We're building relationships. Like, when I went to Podcast Movement, I was super excited to meet you because we had talked on Zoom and you were on my hit list. I was like, okay, I gotta meet these people. And I want to make sure that I meet Cho. And so, that's a big connection point. We wouldn't get through a podcast, right? That we can't put together through a podcast. So I think besides putting yourself where the people are and the people go every day and people go to social media every day because it's designed to keep you addicted to it. Yeah. There's this community element that you can build around a podcast. And we've seen this with all kinds of different shows. Like, Joe Rogan has all these people that just love eating elk meat and throwing axes, right? And The Moth has all these people that love to tell stories, and all these different comedy podcasts do live events. That's all just community. And that's where the magic happens.
Yep. So I love these 2 points that you brought up. First is helping people discover your podcast. And then secondly, building a community, because your audience wants to engage with you too.
Yes.
Outside of your podcast. So very, very important. And podcasters, if they could remember that would make it so easier to just start doing something, even just a little picture of themselves, or something that they want to share, something personal, so that people can know more about the person who does a podcast. Or maybe not necessarily about themselves, but the podcast itself is about branding too. And so that kind of brings me to my next question about if you have any tips or advice for people when they choose their audience and also the platform. I try to narrow it down to Instagram only, just because social media can be a lot. There are LinkedIn, there are Twitter, there are Facebook, and audience interact with you on different platforms too. I myself on a daily basis use Instagram. Ironically, just deleted that just for me on my phone. But for my work, I still do that. I'm taking a little bit of a,
the digital detox. That's good.
Digital detox. But then I know that 5 days after that, I'm like, I want to know what my friends are doing. So I'm back on that again. But, for podcasters who have audience of different demographics, who uses different platforms, what are your advice on like how to find out what is the best platform to grow?
Sure. So I personally think that, what burns people out is that they try to be everywhere all the time. And so I tried that and it didn't work for me, because you're constantly trying to do this, that, and the other thing. So my recommendation is just go to your favorite platform, whatever you like to use, and start there and just build out that platform. So right now I'm on Instagram. Yes, I have a Facebook page, but it's just, I don't post anything there. I have a LinkedIn page. I don't post anything there. I have a YouTube account. I haven't posted there in a long time because I can't consistently keep up with that. And so if you pick the one that you like to use the most, you're more likely to consistently show up. Okay. And that's the best place to start. Now, yes, you should think about your audience, because as podcasters and content creators, we do this for our audience. We do it a little for ourselves, but we do it for our audience. So maybe you want to factor in that, like, if you're teaching 75-year-old men to lift weights or something, that they might be on Facebook or they might be on a specific platform. But if you don't like using the platform, you're not going to go on it. And that's the key to social media, is being active, being a part of the community, using the platform. And so I just recommend people start with one. And, I've spent the last 2 years building my Instagram account up to over 100,000 followers. And I do believe that if I would have been trying to do all the platforms at once, that I wouldn't be as far as I am. Now that I have that, right, I can focus on figuring out a way to distribute my content to all the different platforms, because there is value in distribution. Just like with a podcast, like, you want to make sure that your podcast shows up on all the apps in case your audience maybe uses Pandora or Spotify, right? But I think, where your energy goes is where everything flows. And so if you just make it easy on people and they say, where can I find you? And you say, you can find me on Instagram. It's super easy for them. But if you say, well, you can find me on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Beat Bop and Boobly Bop and whatever the next app is, then it's like, I'm overwhelmed, right? And I might not go take action. So similar to in the call to action of your podcast, you should just send them to one place, right? Just send them to the one place you want them to go. Don't overwhelm them and paralyze them with too many options.
That's awesome. I like that. Very simple to understand, very easy.
Minimalist.
Minimalist. Focus on one thing. Maybe down the line, adopt 2 more if you have.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, like right now I'm posting a lot of short form videos, right? And that's on Reels. There's really no reason I shouldn't be also posting those to TikTok, other than the fact that spend my time doing other things. And at some point I will do that. Right. So, that could be a YouTube short, that could be in different platforms. But, I do still think that it overwhelms you with then now I'm checking another app to see how the video is doing or checking the comments. And you're basically tripling your output on something where you just need to like really focus on growing and growing one thing. We're not trying to build a whole garden in the beginning. We're just trying to really get good at being a member of a community somewhere.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it'd be great for podcasters to keep that in mind since they already have to keep themselves busy and get things done with content planning, with, planning the show notes and inviting guests to their show.
Yeah. It's a lot of work to run a podcast.
Yep. And so social media could sometimes feel like a lot of work too. But so now that they can choose one platform to grow, to start with, what kind of content do you think? I mean, there's no certain recipe, but if you were, to start a whole new page for your new podcast that is just gonna talk to your podcast audience and interact with them on any topic, is there like kind of like a general guidelines or of like a types of posts or content that is easy to make that or they can start developing?
Yeah. So, I mean, with social media, the best practices are that like when you show up on social media, whatever you do should be honoring your audience's time. So if you do a sports podcast, you don't want to go on social media and post your dog and like tacos. You want to post things that are relevant to the thing that they're interested in. So that's like best practices right away. There's something called the hero's journey. Very simple. It's in every movie, every book you've ever read, where there's a hero that encounters an obstacle, and then they meet a guide who helps them overcome the obstacle for a happy ending. And where most people get confused on social media is they make themselves the hero. It's all about them. All the content is about their lives. And what they forget is that they're really the guide. And the guide's job is to either educate or entertain them to help them overcome the obstacle. So if you go in with the idea that I'm going to give as much value as I can with my content and then sprinkle my personality into it, then you have a perfect blend of both. Now, as far as the easiest kind of content to make, it really depends on the platform. I can tell you that like video is king right now. So Instagram's pushing video, TikTok is all video, YouTube's doing short form video now, Twitter, a little different, more conversational and thread like. So, the easiest kind of content that you could create, in my opinion, and maybe because it's easy for me, is just holding up your phone and talking to it on a video, right? We do that on FaceTime. We do that, all the time. But for some reason, when it comes to creating content, people don't want to do it. So if you don't like being on video, I would consider doing something with, if you're on Instagram, carousel posts do really well. And that's just a series of posts and you can just write text on it. So let's say your podcast is about, cooking. You could create a recipe on a bunch of different slides, taking them step by step, how to make risotto or something. And so that becomes valuable. And maybe you talked about risotto on your last podcast episode. So you can make sure that people know that you reviewed the world's #1 risotto restaurant. And then they're more likely to go, oh, cool. Now I know how to make it. I want to hear about the best risotto. And they might go over to actually listen to the podcast. So it's going to be, it's hard with social media because it's so subjective. What's easy for me, writing, like actually like typing and writing things is really difficult for me, where somebody who's a writer might want to go to Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's really easy for me to talk and emote. So video and audio are really like the places I'm most drawn to because it's easy for me. So whatever comes naturally to you. However, I will say that pushing yourself outside of your boundaries sometimes gets you the most growth. So, I was afraid of video. I resisted video. I didn't want to do video. And I pushed myself outside of my boundaries. And now I learned an entirely new skill. And it's something I really love to do now. So you don't want to stay in your box all the time, but you want to start with the thing that comes easiest to you.
Okay, perfect. I like that is easy to understand, and your advice is also like inspires people to take action without overwhelming them that about this literally to say, oh, you have to make a reel, or you have to do this and design this for yourself. But whatever makes you feel like easy to do to start with, and maybe sometimes step out of the box. I use Canva a lot on a daily basis to design things, and I don't need to be, and anyone doesn't need to be like a graphic designer to design simple things, to put text on, to make infographics, to put some text in there, to throw in some snippet of your podcast. Well, Headliner is Blubrry's partner, for example, and so we encourage people to use those tools that we partner with, and snippets of that podcast, a video, and it doesn't have to be have your face on it, but you can use that snippet, bring it onto social media, distribute it there, and so that people can be like, oh, so this is what they're talking in this episode, or talking about something that they are very excited to do, or maybe kind of like have a sneak peek of the next guest that are going to show up in the next episode. So many ideas, and I feel like you cannot really have like a list of all of that in just one conversation between us. But there are many tools online, and we'll probably elaborate more on that in future blog posts too. But would you say that, like, what's the easiest way for people who are not natural to social media to start learning? I personally say observing, but what about you?
Yeah. So one thing that I do, just because I want everything that I do to have a high probability of success, is I go do a little research on what's working for other creators. So this doesn't take very long. It's as simple as going to YouTube and typing in your keyword. Let's say your keyword is mountain climbing, right? I'm just making this up as I go along. So you type in mountain climbing in YouTube, and then you're able to filter within the last month and the top viewed videos. And what that does is that shows you all of the best performing content for that keyword in the last month. And then what I'll do is I'll just look at the title card, what the title card says on it, because usually that's what gets people to click. Okay. So if it says climb this mountain 42 times faster, I might be able to, create a post that's something similar to that, right? Like, get ready to climb the mountain 42 times faster, or climb the mountain 40. I could use that as something that's a proven topic and thread that people are interested in. The other thing I'll do is I just go to TikTok, because TikTok is more popular than anything right now. And I will just search a keyword and filter it by the last 3 months and the most views. That just immediately shows you all the viral content. And I just look at what they like, what's the beginning of the video? What does it say on it? And I'll use that as a spark to then go create my own idea. And you can do this with other industries too, right? So, I saw a post the other day. It was like the cheat code to getting out of debt. And I was like, cool, the cheat code that's a great spark for me. So I could put in anything, the cheat code to podcasting, the cheat code to social media, right? You can use what's working for other people as a spark for you. Now, when it comes to comparison, you have to remember that someone might be further down their career than you, and you need to be careful about looking at somebody and feeling inferior or insecure compared to them, right? When you post on social media, it's very rare that someone is immediately judging you, your voice, the way you look, what's in the background of the video. Yes, there's always things that could be improved, but that's, I think, what keeps most people away, is that they're worried about what people will think about them. So I have this sort of DGAF attitude where I just say, if I think this is good and this is the best I can do, then I'm happy with it, right? And anybody who isn't, maybe there's trolls out there, and there's always going to be people that, have comments and stuff. If they took time out of their day to tell me something kind of nasty, then I already won, because they saw my thing and it moved them in a way that made them so angry that they had to leave a comment, right? So, but that's very rare, right? It's very rare to be judged. And I think that just keeps people from, I think watching too much content keeps people from making. So you want to be careful about how much you're consuming. And then I think that sort of fear of being judged keeps people from making. So you want to go onto a social media platform, look at something that inspires you, and then go make something. You turn off the phone, or you turn off the social media app, and spend your time making instead of just consuming.
I like that. Awesome. I also can relate to that too, because making content, um, the reason why it could be intimidating sometimes is because people feel like, um, am I saying something that's gonna offend someone, or something that's gonna they're gonna be haters coming at me because they don't like the way I look or the way that I am sharing this content, or they just kind of like shaming you for becoming on the camera. But
Yeah, I've gone viral multiple times, and I've had some of the nastiest comments said about me. And you know what? I just take it in stride, and I just say, hey, clearly that person's having a bad day, right? Clearly, nothing I've said in this video is enough to garner that kind of response. But a lot of times when it comes to haters or trolls, what they're doing is they're putting their insecurities on you. So what they're doing is saying, you're doing something that I can't personally do, so I'm going to try to tear you down. And if you let those people affect you in that way, then you might get torn down. But if you look at it as like, it's just part of the game, and that person has some insecurity issues, and you realize that more people are seeing your content, then it's actually a win, because all press is good press, right? Like, people talking about you either way, the more people you reach, and you see this in celebrities, right? The more people you reach, the more haters you will have, because not everybody's going to love you, and that's okay. So like, you look at like Kanye West, right? He's like, some people think he's the greatest rapper alive, and some people think he's a total psychopath, right? But either way, he wins because people are talking about him. So there's an awareness factor that even the people that don't like you are still going to go check out what you're doing, because they are insecure, and they know you're up to something that they can't handle. So you just have to have fun with it.
Mhm.
And not take it personally, right? Nobody's perfect. And so, if somebody comments on your appearance, they're really projecting their thoughts about themselves on you. Or if they think that your video's dumb, then fine, that's your opinion. You just didn't keep it to yourself.
Right. On TikTok, I've watched a lot of videos on that, and it's funny how TikTok taught me a lot about psychology, and I hear the terms, projecting people one's insecurities on others a lot, and then I'm like, wow, I wish I knew that earlier. When dealing with haters or bullies, and I think that that's a really good thing that podcasters can keep in mind. But even themselves, they're already like publishing their episodes and already share their stories and have an audience already. And so most of the podcasters that I talk to are very comfortable with talking, with speaking, of course, right? And then most of them are also okay with being out there, showing their face, or just being on social media and staying active. Um, what about those who don't necessarily want to show their face?
Yeah.
Like, do you think that there's a way that they can still grow? Because I know some people have come to me and like, I mean, I don't mind it, but it's just gonna be a lot of work. And so how do I produce content that can still relate to my audience about my podcast? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't want to put your face out there, there's a lot of different ways you can grow. So, the point of view angle of just seeing what you see without seeing you can work. So I'm absolutely obsessed with this show on HBO. I can't remember the name of the show, but it's just this guy who lives in New York and walks around and films stuff and tells stories. You never see him, but it's incredible. It's just his voice narrating. If you didn't want to put your face out there, you could, people love to see drone footage. They love to see things being built. You could just use your hands, right? So there's lots of ways. I will say that biologically, we look for faces. So when you're born, the first thing you look for is mom's face. When you look at the moon, you see a face. And if you look at a tree long enough, you'll eventually see a face, because it's part of our DNA. And so with people being attracted to faces, I'd like to ask the person, well, why is it that you don't want to be seen? Right? There's something underneath that, because when we grow up, we get our class picture and we're in pictures and we go out in the world. Why don't you want to be seen? The answer to that question is usually something around being judged or something around insecurity of the appearance or, I put a post out a long time ago about, a lot of podcasters hate their voice, right? And as somebody who's been in the music industry for a long time, I've recorded a lot of singers. Everybody hates their voice. And I use the example of some incredible actors, and I'm just going to name one, for example, Steve Buscemi. Do you know who Steve Buscemi is? Okay, so he's got crazy teeth, right? Like, and he's not like he's not a Brad Pitt. He's kind of googly-eyed guy, right? And he has made an entire career off of being the oddball in the movie, and he's got a really interesting voice, and he does voiceovers for Disney, right? So what I like to tell people is, like, the weirder you are, I think it's the better you are. And if there's something weird about you, go all in on that. Make that your signature thing. So if you have a weird voice, lean into it. It might turn into an opportunity for you. And if you don't want to put your face on social media, I guess the best thing you could do is probably go more of text-based. So creating content that's just text on a screen where you're maybe telling a story or using footage with captions over it. But I do think that if you really break it down psychologically, that you would be, there's something underneath it that you're not facing.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I've met people who have been the mysterious podcasters.
I mean, there's something pretty cool about being mysterious. I actually follow this TikTok guy who's like, he does finance stuff about like banks and the government, but he's like completely blacked out. Like the way he has his lighting is you just can't see his face. And it's actually pretty intriguing because it's more like, ooh, who's the mystery man? So, you can play into that if you wish, like make sure the lighting just darkens your face out, but you're still on camera. Could be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes a cartoon character got famous too, and the person who invented that cartoon characters never really shows up. So I like to see the podcast as like the product that the podcaster build, and there are so many ways that you can tell a story about it. But definitely, once in a while, or if you can show up and show people your face and let people know who you are, that'd be amazing because they can relate to you and know who they are listening to. Because that's how I feel when I'm on the podcast. I feel like whenever I listen to a podcast, it's like having a conversation with someone, especially I really like, even though I cannot talk back to them, like I cannot converse with them, and I can listen. It's like very soothing and calming to me, and so. And I like to listen to those that are educational. And so just, for example, like a podcast on a topic, like let's say machine learning, because sometimes I'm very nerdy and I like machine learning. So I like to listen to that. And it's just great to see the text and infographics about that, or design. I like talk podcasts about designing too, and so I follow their account for the design that podcasters talk about, and so more. I think that the key here is you're helping your audience find the value that they're looking for, like creating something that your audience finds helpful and valuable.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, value-based, I think the days, a decade ago, you posted the food you ate and the beach that you're on and all this stuff. That's what like social media was, but it has evolved quite quickly into a value proposition. And, again, with the hero's journey, like we are not the heroes of the story. We are the guide, and our job is to give as much value as we can to our audience, share some cool stuff with our audience, and, sprinkle in ourselves. So it's not to be, you're not to never speak of yourself ever again, but those are the accounts that typically do the best, or the value-led ones, or the really entertaining ones, right? So with podcasting, there's a lot of entertainment involved. So if you're an entertainment podcaster, I think podcasters need to remember one thing. The cool thing about podcasting is that you feel like you're sitting at the table with the people, right?
Yeah.
But if you imagine that you're at this table and you're with these people and you're watching the conversation, but the room is pitch black, you can't see them, right? At some point, you're going to kind of want to have a clue of who you're hanging out with. And I think that's where social media comes in, to where you can, show people. I mean, I've done this a million times. I'll hear someone on a podcast and I go Google image them. I just want to see what they look like. I want to see what face is attached to that voice.
Mhm.
And I think that curiosity at some point peaks in every podcast fan. Like, what does this guy look like? What does this lady look like? And it gives us a better internal representation of them. So by putting yourself out on social media, I think you give people some context clues to where they can get a little closer to you.
Awesome. What about follower growth? And then like the gaining followers. Do you think that numbers like followers really matter? And a lot of people don't know if they are successful. Like they don't know how to measure their success, or they're looking at the numbers like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing because the numbers are so low, engagement rate is so low. So what else, what should be the thing that they should be looking at? And yeah.
Okay, so as somebody with 100,000 followers, I've been through every single stage as a creator. And I can tell you that as you get more followers, there are opportunities that present themselves to you, right? There's opportunities to work with brands, or, it's really a vanity metric, right? It's like, I could buy you 100,000 followers today, right? And put them on your account, but no one's going to interact with you. No one's going to look at your content. It'll just be a number on the screen. So if you focus on, as opposed to the follower number, the interactions that you have, like, I'd much rather just have 1,000 people who are just obsessed with me than 100,000 who could care, like kind of half care about what I'm doing, right? So if you focus more on interactions, and one of the ways you can do this is through something called unscalable conversations. And that's simply, as you become a member of a social media community, you should be commenting on other people in your niche's post, and you should be sending audio messages to new followers, introducing yourself, trying to start a conversation. It's very similar to a party. And if I invited you to my party and you came in, but you couldn't find me anywhere, you'd probably leave, right? Because I had invited you to the party. So when someone comes to the party, we want to say, hey, thanks so much for coming. I want to make you comfortable. Do you know where the bathroom is, right? What's new in your world? It's social media. It's not just media. So if you think of it like a party, you can have a lot of fun regardless of how many followers you have, right? And I do think this is very prevalent in podcasting too. Like, a lot of people are obsessed with their download numbers, but I would get more obsessed with, like, how many people are like reaching out, how many people are, opening my emails and things like that, because those are like real people, as opposed to just somebody who presses play on a podcast. So it's all how you look at it. And I understand everybody wants more followers. Everyone wants, all this stuff. But the difference between my account with 3,000 followers and 100,000 followers isn't much different. I pretty much like have the same little community, and I don't look at I don't like the word influencer, because I think that if you can get somebody to eat a piece of pie, then you're an influencer. You've influenced them. So like, I think there's some kind of like gross stuff around that, but it's inevitably something you'll focus on. But if you focus on it in a way of just like, well, my community's growing, number really shouldn't matter, right? Your interactions should matter.
Yeah. And how people know you, because if your audience knows who you are, and if you know who are listening to your show, I think that's a win. And a lot of podcasters come to us and ask, how do I know more about my audience? And we have the audience survey where you can learn more about the demographics of your listeners. But those are just numbers, like based on those data, you can't really know exactly who you're listening to. So I feel like, yes, social media, one of the benefits that you can know the people that you are serving, your content too. And so from that point, you can develop more content that cater to them, or something that like serve what the people need. uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think of there's a couple of things with your personal brand, right? And your personal brand encompasses your social media and your podcast and everything else. One part of it is your reputation, right? Like your reputation is everything. And if you look at your personal brand as a club, if you were going to start a club in your local community, you'd start small, you'd invite people in, you'd get to know people, you'd network. It's the same concept, except it's all digital now. So the key to like specifically podcasters is to make your podcast into a club where, you have callbacks to, you might call your listeners like a name, not like a bad name, but like if let's say you're the mountain climbers, like, you call them the mountaineers. What's up, mountaineers? And everybody identifies with this mountaineers name. Okay. And you want to make it this inclusive thing that if you're in, you're in. And when you come in, you'll be welcomed.
mhm.
And that's the best way. I mean, I think all the best podcasts I've ever listened to have some form of like tribe element to it,
Yeah, yeah, like a community,
and
something exclusive.
yeah, and I've used this example before, but like, there's so many people that are like, oh, I only got 100 downloads. But if they walked into a room with 100 people sitting there to talk, their heart would start pounding. They'd start sweating. They'd have a response to it because it's a lot of people, right? So if you focus less on the quantity and more on the quality, and you understand that this whole thing doesn't happen overnight, like,
Yeah.
I went from 10,000 to 100,000 followers in 6 weeks. And everybody just kept saying to me, like, wow, you just blew up overnight. And I've been working my butt off for 2 years to get to that point, And I would just respond and say, yeah, I'm a 2-year overnight success, right? Because overnight success is basically winning the lottery, right? If you buy a lottery ticket on a Friday and you win Friday night, Saturday, you're a millionaire, overnight success. But these things take time and they take time to blossom. And if you can just get really comfortable with the thought of, I try to make one friend a day on social media, just one handshake. Like I try to meet somebody new, have an interaction, and that compounds over time.
Mhm.
So if you just focus on the one person, if you were on a date and you're looking at your date and you're at a bar and you guys are holding your drinks and she's just looking around you the whole time, you wouldn't feel very like important. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that happens when people want bigger audiences is they start looking over the people that are right there with them.
Right.
And it's not very magnetic and it's not very valuable to them to just be like, well, you're here, but where's everybody else? Right. So if you get into that mentality of like, I've got my core people, if it's 30 people, it's 30 people. Those people will inevitably tell more people about you.
Mm-hmm. Wow, all of these examples are amazing because it's like it's just make it so much easier to understand. And sometimes we forgot social media is just a platform where you can make friends, because that's literally what it was built in the beginning for. And then slowly you can gradually change into something that like you can grow a business out of that. And people forgot that. I'm like, do I need to do this fancy stuff to attract new followers? But they forgot that, like, if it comes from the heart, like your intention is to build a community, um, just like welcoming everyone, and inviting everyone, make it friendly, make it fun for the
Make it a safe
people.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all that matters, right? And so I feel like podcasters who listen to this episode will find it very helpful, and I hope that they can start thinking about branding and building a community, and just starting by making friends. So like
Yeah.
really.
I mean, if I could give anybody who's listening to this just one challenge, it would be to, because I know what everyone's rebuttal is right now. They're thinking, well, I have to make my podcast. I don't have time for social media. So the quickest way that you could start putting yourself out on social media is when you get done with your episode, take out your phone press the video button and say, hey, name of my gang.
Mm.
Just finished the episode about blank. We talked about this, we talked about this, and we talked about this. And the episode will be live on Monday. Can't wait for you to hear it, right? Like just giving them the heads up that they're on the inner side of you behind the scenes and what's coming next will do you wonders. It will do you much better than saying, new episode out now. Check out this episode. Check out the podcast. Nobody cares.
Mhm.
Just talk to one person. And if you have a hard time looking at the camera, imagine your grandma or someone who makes you smile. And imagine you're telling your grandma, hey, grandma, this week we talked about X, Y, and Z. And it's probably my favorite episode ever. The link's in my bio. Go check it out. Right. It's casual. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be something that derails your entire week. You don't have to make 50 posts about one episode.
Yeah.
Just keep it casual and have fun with it, because there's a lot of people that don't get to podcasts. There's a lot of people that don't get to use social media, and whatever you do, you should try to have as much fun with it as you can, because that comes through the microphone, that comes through the camera. And we didn't start podcasting, I don't think, at least maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think most people start podcasting because they're like trying to make money. I think they're trying to have fun and tell their story. And once you get into it and you see that analytics dashboard and you see these numbers, you kind of lose sight of that, right?
Yep. You kind of got caught up in the numbers.
Yeah. So like have some fun and know that if you're getting 100 downloads, like you're a success. There's 100 people out there listening to what you have to say. And the more fun you have, the more fun your audience will have. And that will inherently be magnetic to more people.
Wow, that's amazing. That's the best challenge ever. And I'm gonna post this part specifically so that everyone can know. And that will be a challenge for them. But I'm sure a lot of people have started a social media account for the podcast already. And so it's time that they have more fun with it, right? Because
absolutely make it fun, make it something that you can have fun with, and people who look at it can have fun with, and you can in that capacity you can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just having fun every day. That's what we're doing.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
That's the goal. That's what I'm doing at my job too. Job is a job, but you still gotta have fun.
Yeah. Well, you're a rock star, and I love what you do. I love Blubrry. At Podcast Movement, one of my favorite presentations was Todd's presentation about growing a podcast. He said so many things that, I already knew, but a lot of things I hadn't thought about, and he shared it in a really great way. And I think the team at Blubrry is absolutely incredible. So thank you so much for picking me to have this conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you for spending your time talking to us and sharing your valuable social media experience you've gained over the years. And
yeah, happy to help.
Great. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of the weekend.
Amazing. Cheers.
Okay.